Well, the Russia-Ukraine conflict is likely to cause trade tension in the Black Sea corridor, which will constrain the supply and availability of fertilizer in South Africa. This will affect all farmers as they rely on imported fertilizer to produce commodities, including pastures for livestock. The impact of fertilizer and fuel price hikes will be transmitted to food retail prices, thus impacting consumer prices in the short term. Now, for a little bit more on this impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we're now joined by Dr Christo Joubert, who's the manager, Agro Food Chains at the National Agricultural Marketing Council. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good day. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for the time. South Africa is a producer of fertilizer. How is it that we end up importing? Is there a huge shortfall?
Yes, South Africa downgraded a lot of the manufacturing systems with a lot of challenges, and it was not viable at that stage. And if you're looking at history, then we see we started with a 40% import. Currently, we importing around about 80% of our fertilizer, and it's not all coming from Russia and the Ukraine. There's a lot coming from the Middle East. Russia is we import around about 2.2 billion rands of fertilizer towards South Africa from Russia, and which was the rush after fertilizer prices increased dramatically over the past year due to a lot of challenges in the world and to a lot of growth in terms of producing grains, etc. But yes, and then on the back of that, although we produce a lot of phosphate and phosphoric acid in South Africa, we have a lot of challenges regarding internal infrastructure, etc., that we need to sort out in South Africa. But there's some of the natural resources that we do not have in South Africa that we need to import to produce a proper fertilizer mix for the South African agricultural market. So that is where some of the challenges is lying on the South Africa system, and I want to encourage government that we start looking to produce more fertilizers in South Africa. We have a lot of other resources that we can use. If you only look at Phosphor, which is one of our big main supplier of phosphate and phosphoric acid, and if you're looking at Sasol, which is a huge supplier of ammoniac, which is the starting point of bringing some certain ingredients in the fertilizer chain, then we need to look to develop that to bring a sustainability system in our food security.
All right, so in the short term, does it mean that we will get as much fertilizer as we need, we just have to pay a lot more for it, or are quantities also under threat?
Yes, I believe so. We must realize that Russia and Ukraine is big players in the total system, and when you go into these acts of war and then you're going into turmoils. So obviously you're taking a lot of trade out of the system. So we can expect, with already the increase on fertilizers and fuel, etc., that we can expect that we're going to see increases. But on the back of that, I really believe that we do not need to overthrow the apple cart and look at that at this stage. Yeah. If we're looking at the cost of a loaf of bread, the producer or the producer of the wheat is getting around about 20% of the price of bread. There's other stuff that also have an impact, like fuel, transport, etc., on that system. So yes, we're going to see increases in input costs. But we also need to understand what's going on in the value chain. So the impact will be there across our whole agricultural sector. And then I need to mention it, that South Africa have a very good food system, how we produce fruit. So we have the availability. The affordability is the issue, and the accessibility is also further in a certain way also issue. But I think at this stage, I do not want to say that we must start panicking, but we can prepare ourselves for increases in food prices, increases in food inflation at a certain extent, and then it may be emphasize and look at what South Africa can do, and we need to become more efficient in a lot of our certain ways, like transport, Transnet, road, our infrastructure system, and then we can ease this. When we run into the 2008 crisis in the world, when markets was crashed, then we saw South Africa was really okay at that stage because we have a huge maize crop. This is what we currently have. Our wheat farmers really produce a lot of wheat this year, but we still need to import wheat. And the previous year we imported around about 30% of wheat from Ukraine and Russia, and we need to look at that and become more self-sufficient. We have systems in place, but yes, we're going to see increases in food prices.
All right, so we're seeing fertilizer prices go up almost immediately, and I'm just wondering why that is. Is this speculative? Because I would imagine there would have been stocks built up over time so that these price increases should have happened a little bit later on. Why have they happened so quickly? Is it speculative more than actual shortages?
No, this is reaction from, and not from the Russian-Ukraine situation. It's already actions from what happened last year in the whole grain market with the COVID system that started getting out of it, and then also with the La Nina effect, that what we saw in certain parts of the world where there was grain shortages, especially in Latin America, which is a huge grain supplier of the world. So this is the increases that we currently see is not the Ukraine-Russia system, but the Russian-Ukraine situation putting more pressure on the total system.
All right. I suppose, as you were saying earlier, this is an opportunity for us as well to restructure our own fertilizer production industry so that we return perhaps to days before when we produced a lot more of our own, and also starting to produce the kind of fertilizer that we need.
You're totally correct on that one. And I'm very glad that you raised that, and it actually shows that we need much more research and to intensify, let's say, the IDC and DTI and all these departments, that we need to focus to keep a sustainable food supply in the system, and not only the food supply, but also the input costs of the input supplies that we need. On that, we have done huge studies on chemicals, and the farmers is really paying a high price on that also. But yeah, we need to see that we can fulfill a big part of the chain from the resources that we have, and let's go forward and yes, see that our food system, see that we have enough food in our country, because we food secure on on gross level to say like that, but on primary level to get the food to the rural areas is a little bit difficult.
All right, Dr. Joubert, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks very, very much indeed for that insightful conversation. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right, that's Dr. Christo Joubert talking about the challenges that not just South Africa, but much of the world that imports fertilizer in particular is going to face in the coming months. Increased prices that will filter through to what you buy in the shops, all because of what's happening in Russia and Ukraine.